to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, your host, joined, as most of the time usual, by my lovely aquatic co-host, Jack.
Yeah, I'm, I guess, under a deluge right now. I don't know if you're aware of that. I guess you can just guess when it comes to Juno, but maybe that's what you were going for? Or maybe there's some other aquatic reason.
It was more to do with the fact that you live in a rainforest. I was telling somebody about the rainforest in Juneau today, and they were very surprised that Juneau is in the world's largest temperate rainforest.
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit like Kevin Costner in Waterworld. I'm starting to develop gills and stuff.
Well, thankfully you don't have anything here blocking it, so your gills can breathe free. I get weird hair growing there. I don't like it very much. Well, welcome into our audience. Thank you for letting us have our silly little I come up with an adjective and Jack tries to improv his way out of it thing we like to do at the start of the podcast. Jack, what have you played this week?
Hey, I have played a really cool game this week. I actually have a visual for those who are watching this. I got Lord of the Rings Fate of the Fellowship, and I'm not so much of a hold up a board game type of guy. In fact, for some behind the scenes type of stuff, I was giving some criticism to Eric recently where I was like, just holding up the game the entire review, doesn't that feel like amateur hour? And then I realized the next review I did, I was holding up a game and I was like, man, I kind of seem like a jerk when I say that. But, use it for emphasis, make it a distinctive. If you're going to hold it, make that part of what you're doing or the environment. Anyway, Fate of the Fellowship is the new Matt Leacock pandemic system game. It's not pandemic Lord of the Rings in the way that you might think of Monopoly, Lord of the Rings Monopoly or something like that. But it definitely has the lineage, the heritage, the DNA of pandemic in it. I don't know. I think Z-Man just wants to, slap something on there when I think about it. If Z-Man were responsible for, say, Forbidden Island, they would call Forbidden Island a pandemic system game. It's about that connected. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's... And I kind of get it in terms of, I don't know. For me, with, my film background, it's always... There's so much discussion of you want to make a prop, even if it has nothing to do with the original property, 19 Cloverfield Lane or whatever it was, that has nothing to do with real Cloverfield, but they want to just slap on the Cloverfield branding because it helps sell games and it makes it so much easier to very confidently put that product out there. Yeah, and I kind of get it.
Yeah, and I think it's going to pique the interest of a lot of people who maybe are pandemic diehards, my friends Sarah and Nico are pandemic obsessed. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of people who would be hesitant to play a game if they thought it was just a licensed IP pasted on top of, or loosely pasted on top of a pre-existing game. And so I think they did a really smart thing here. It's not in the same shape as a typical pandemic box. The pandemic system is very minimalized here. And they really wanted to emphasize this Fate of the Fellowship as the name. And yeah, it really is a game that feels completely unique, like it's an original idea, an original concept that has some of the elements that you might expect from Pandemic, particularly in the character-based action system, some familiarity with the draw two cards and you might have to reshuffle the bad stuff deck and put it on top so you have recurring elements coming up.
Yeah.
But the implications and the carrying out of that is completely different. How you structure objectives is completely different. I played it a couple times already, and it has been impressive each time that it's hit the table. It's not without flaws.
Yeah, totally.
My God, the pieces, the little army pieces are so tiny. They're so tiny. Not even the Nazgul, just the little soldiers that you're moving around. It's like they took a pandemic cube and then shaved away about 50% of the material in order to put it in the shape of a dude. So
with sword,
it's already
with
small.
Sword.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
with
So
sword.
it's really cool looking.
Very small sword.
It's very small sword. I think the most intriguing thing I can say about this game is that, as a huge Lord of the Rings fan, this seems to capture the kind of like grandeur, the epic intent of a lot of Middle-earth games, like, say, War of the Ring, having a very large scope, having a lot of moving parts, and this like epic journey and thematic storytelling, and this combative war element, but automates a lot of the war, and it's like there's a clockwork war game that's happening amidst you doing the heroic navigation and positioning that happens at a character level. It has some really interesting implications. I was kind of dubious on it, to be honest. Like, when it was announced, I was like, I don't know. There's a lot of crap that's getting Lord of the Rings paces on it these days.
There's so much.
Middle-earth is hot again.
Middle-earth is in its glow-up phase, and by glow-up phase, I mean that it's been blown up, but people are now coming to terms with how cool it is for board games.
Well, what people might not realize is that Asmodee, the like company, is owned by the same investment company that owns Middle-earth Entertainment, that holds the rights to a lot of the Tolkien IP that can be published. This is separate from the Tolkien estate itself, but the rights holders, through large investment company means, are under the same umbrella, just by happenstance. So it's not like Asmodee North America had to get licensed to do this. They just happen to be owned by the same mega corporation that already was like, yeah, we're the people who get to control who make board games of this. That's brand synergy in late stage capitalism.
Synergy.
Yes. It's a cool game. I'm very excited by it. And it blends some of the elements of my favorite Middle-earth games of yore. There's DNA to me of Middle-earth Quest in there, the Knizia Lord of the Rings, and the and War of the Ring in there, and it has a cartoony, but still at the same time very impressive, nuanced art style that feels kind of like the Ralph Bakshi movie from the 70s, which is also really cool. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. We'll have a review up, I think, next week is when we're going to push that. And man,
it's a good review. For the audience at home, let me tell you, is a good review. You're going to want to tune in.
Well, I got to pull that clip of Matt Leacock. I was like, man, what did I interview him like 3 or 4 years ago? I'm like, it's 8 years ago. It was 2017. Yeah, so like it was ages ago.
It hurts for you to say that's 8 years ago. Oh, that's
right?
That's a painful one that you just dropped on me. Ugh,
yeah.
Gross.
And while I've played some other stuff, the only other thing that I wanted to mention is a shout out to Jared Carmichael of 3 Minute Board Games. I just got a promotional copy of his new book, 101 Board Games to Try Before You Die of Boredom. And he's been a great ambassador for the hobby.
He has been.
Format is really amazing and deserves the accolades that it gets. And I just started reading through this book since I received it earlier today. Has some pull quotes on the back from Jamie Stegmaier and Jeff Engelstein. So it's at least worth giving a look into if you're someone who likes reading some board game material, like if you like Senate Magazine or something like that. I have huge amounts of respect for Jared. He's been a guest on the podcast before. And shout out to him for making a cool book about board games.
Rad. That's cool. I'm glad that's... First of all, cool that you got the review copy. I would be interested to see what 101 games made the cut. Is it like primarily games that he thinks are like the best of all time, or games that he think are the most interesting or the most important in board game history? Like, where is he going there?
According to the foreword, which I read, it is largely games that have made an impact to him. They also have to be somewhat visually distinctive. They can't be games that he's published. Red Dust Rebellion, I think, has come out by now. I think as of writing the book, it hadn't come out, and he has another design that he's working on. But it really seems to be like if he was trying to categorize truly 101 board games that he'd recommend other people try, possibly as an entry point into gaming or as an entry point into a type of gaming. He separates it into subsections based off of quick and fun games, family-friendly games, low conflict, games that need cooperation. Your favorite show is now a game, so that's like licensed games and stuff. Games that tell stories, educational games, high conflict, games for one, and games that hurt your brain. So, yeah.
My brain's had it too good for too long.
Right, and there's some deep pulls in here, which I think is really cool. Like, I know that Jared is very politically oriented. He's someone who seems very principled and very progressive. And so, like things that make you question or maybe challenge your assumptions or something that matters to him. So, like, I was pleased to see that Block by Block Uprising was in here,
cool.
For example. Which is, a small little indie game, but does some challenging and interesting things in this space that isn't typically done. But at the same time, there's new stuff in here. Like, there's a page just on arcs, they're keeping up with relatively new stuff. When I'm done, I hope to do some sort of review for the channel. It's always hard with print media like this to see what, it really comes down to the writing and the entries. How soon will this be dated, right? Like if someone got this book 10 years from now, is it still going to be of value? If it's merely recommendations, then that's not that great. But if it's essays, like why these games were an impact to him or to other contributors, then that becomes timeless, right? Like kind of like reading a Pauline Kael review of a movie that came out in 1972 or something. Sure, there's been other analysis of that movie that has come out since, but having that person's perspective thinking about what the society was like, what the culture of film was like at the time, and going deeper into, what is the impact and purpose of this film, not just as a consumer, but on the landscape itself, makes it much more interesting. But yeah, I'll dive into it more later, and I'm hoping that I'm going to have this done by the time that you're up here in Juneau, which is going to be relatively soon. And I can hand it off to you because you're a big geek who likes to read board game related stuff.
I read those things frequently, which brings me to what I've played this week. I actually have not played like a published board game this week. I've played a couple other things though. First of all, I've started a Mythic Odyssey of Theros campaign, and by that I've taken, it's a D&D campaign. I've taken the Wizards of the Coast Magic the Gathering world of Theros, which is Greek mythology, but changed a little bit to make it non-copyright. Yeah. And then taken it back to Greek mythology. So I have played.
Wait. To make it non-copyright on Greek mythology, I don't think that
that is what
that Homer is coming after you.
They've
made it into copyright. They've taken Greek mythology and then said we're going to change it enough so we can copyright it.
Exactly. Well, that is true, and that is probably what ended up happening. And they also probably wanted to not be beholden to being incredibly lore accurate to Greek mythology. As well, but also this is a Magic the Gathering card set that they have then turned into a campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons. It started off as just this is the world for a card set for Magic the Gathering, which then became Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and you have campaign things for Theros, the land of Theros, and then I have undone all of the work they did to make it non-copyright because I'm playing with people who are new to D&D, and I figured having them also learn, on top of the game system, all of the different, just new names for different gods, was maybe one step too far. So now we're just going to go back to ancient Greece. We're back to Greek mythology. But I have gotten I got a session 0 in, and we are planning out our next session. I also ran a one-shot recently not in that campaign setting, but just generic D&D campaign setting.
So what are the things that you prioritize as part of a session 0? Because this is a relatively new thing to me. I grew up in the periphery of RPGs, and now a session 0 is expected as a de facto. You need to have this because this is part of what's going to make a cohesive campaign. It sets expectations. It allows people to get questions out of the way. Yeah. And I think it's fantastic. But when I was first getting introduced to role-playing games, particularly, say, in the 90s, maybe some groups would have session 0s, but the terminology wasn't necessarily set, nor I think was there an expectation of everyone's going to get together and hash out some elements about the game before actually playing the game. So for those in the audience who don't know what a session 0 is, what is it, and what are the things that you're really trying to prioritize?
Yeah, totally. So for me, at least, a session 0 is just something you should do to just make sure everybody's on the same page before the campaign starts. Now, what that page is to you, there's a lot of different things to discuss. I think the one that is most frequently discussed is what is the setting we're playing in? What should the players expect from this campaign? Just making sure that expectations are set of for me, I told my players, I'm going to do a kind of whimsical, silly campaign. There are going to be some moments of seriousness. We are going to have oh no, this is a terrible thing that's happening to the world. But all in all, it's going to be a kind of bit of a silly, fun campaign. Just make sure everybody knows that is baseline what we're doing. I actually my session zeros used to be a lot different before I read the rulebook for Kids on Brooms, which is just, they compile a lot of different things, but one of the things that I used since reading it is start off the discussion with like any boundaries players have. So like what I like to say is I've had a player in a campaign who requested that I not bring up any head trauma, like specifically or graphically, for reasons that I don't know, because I didn't ask. I don't ask my players to like give like justifications, because that seems maybe not fun for anybody involved to hear why you don't want to hear this thing. But like making sure that everybody is having a good time, I feel it kind of requires you just knowing like, oh, this is a topic that you don't want involved. And then also just being like, as a DM, these are the things that I'm going to be bringing up more frequently, making sure that everybody's on top of like what the scheduling is going to be. So like every other Tuesday, does that work for everybody? Okay, great. So we're going to plan on that. And here's just making sure you go over situations as much as possible before they happen. So another thing is like, what if a player can't make it? Do we just play a session without them? And I think that kind of depends on how many players you have, but just making sure you like talk about these situations that are almost certainly going to come up during the campaign.
It reminds me a lot of like leadership training that I've taken and hopefully utilize some of the best aspects of that in my own leadership in professional settings. Like people should know expectations, and you as the leader should know the preferences and needs of the people that you're working with, so that way you can find the best ways of collaboration, of motivation, of making sure they feel fulfilled, while at the same time they know what their obligations are, what happens when the expectations fall apart, those kinds of things. It's such a smart way to start off a campaign, because there's such a level of investment, and the last thing that you want is, one, for someone to get their feelings hurt or to feel like they're in an unsafe space, but also kind of like the schism that can come out of misunderstood or misaligned expectations. Some people want very different things out of a role-playing game. Do you discuss things like level of severity in or adherence to rules? Like, for example, something that I think about a lot is I one time heard a DM talk about how they always try to explain how tightly monitored resources are going to be. Like, I'm just going to assume you have unlimited arrows. You never have to tell me how many arrows that you have. You don't have to keep track of how many arrows that you have. The only time in which the number of arrows that you have is going to be of any relevance whatsoever is if I specifically tell you, in this situation, like you tumbled down a crevice and much of your gear was destroyed upon the fall, and inspecting what you have, you realize you have 2 good arrows and like 30 feet of rope, and that's all you have available to you. That's the only time in which a limitation on common materials is actually going to be applied. Like, do you talk about that stuff in session 0?
Yeah, definitely. So that is something that I brought up, and it was more to do with spellcasters, just because in D&D spellcasters have like specific components that they need to use essentially to cast a spell, and there's a few different ways to rule it where you can make them use that as a limitation against spellcasters, because spellcasters in D&D are typically more powerful than their melee counterparts. But how I run it and what I told my players is, very similarly, is unless there's a reason for you to not have access to these things, I'm going to assume that you have done your due diligence and purchased the things you need from the market to cast the spells that you have. Another thing that I discussed with them, just going back to like how tight we're going to be on the rules, is I let them know any homebrew rules that I have. So I have a couple that I just like always use in every campaign just because I think they're fun. And just making sure the players know that that is a deviation from the normal rule set, especially if they're new players, so that they don't just expect that with every DM. Like just letting them know, hey, this is a homebrew rule that I have in place for this situation. That's not how the game tells you to rule it necessarily, but that is how I like to rule it, and that's what we're doing. I typically always homebrew in favor of the players as a DM. So like one homebrew rule I have is... Listen, the goal of the game is to
win.
Tell a good story. That is what everybody is at the table to do. That is everybody. Everybody's at the table to tell a good story, and I think giving players more things that make them feel more powerful, even if it's a niche situation, makes them feel more powerful and therefore makes them feel better. And you can then use that to tell a better story where it's like... So one of the rules I have is for critical hits in D&D, the way it's supposed to work is if you roll a nat 20, you roll the damage die that you have twice and then apply the bonus once. What I choose to do instead is roll the damage die once, add the bonus, and then assume that on the second damage die roll, they rolled whatever the max is. So if they like to make sure that critical hits are actually something that is powerful. Like this is a thing that you have done which is really stellar. So you have like a D12 plus 3 damage on like a normal hit. We're just assuming you've rolled a 12.
Then you would get,
So you're getting
you get
12
a 12
plus
and
4
a 4
plus 3.
and then the 3.
Because I have had times where I've gotten a critical hit, rolled damage dice twice, and gotten 3 damage total from the rolled dice, and then 3 damage, and it's like, I just got a 6. That's just a normal hit. It feels
it's
not
a critical
very great.
hit and a glance at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean, if that character weren't such a weakling, then maybe you could have done better. Okay, well, one more question about this setting, both as the setting itself and the retrofit back into Greek mythology. Greek mythology is one of the sexiest of mythologies.
Oh, yeah.
How sexy is this setting and your retrofit campaign?
Ooh, let me tell you, it is probably not that sexy, all things considered.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, let's just say I played Hades, and that's like the level of expectation that I have for any Greek-based mythological fantasy right now.
This is another thing that you would probably discuss in session 0, which is how do you deal with intimate relationships? And my ruling as a DM is I don't want to narrate them. You can absolutely have them, but we're just going to fade to black.
Good call.
Yeah,
I think that's a decent thing to do for video games as well.
Yeah,
you know, like especially because video games, like I don't mind adult stuff being in my books or in movies or even video games or anything like that. But there is some sort of crossover in video games where you're playing as a character that like crosses this threshold. That feels more forced upon you. I don't know. Like in video games, I tend to prefer that if there's romantic relations, even if there's something that you pursue and have to consent to and attain, I like the much more fade to black and then, you know, come back to it and everything is just dialogue. Maybe I'm just not man enough to really hang with Will in Baldur's Gate. Oh man,
you kind of look like Kratos. How do you feel about the QuickTime events in God of War? Those scenes.
Yeah. What? Okay.
He's your effigy.
Greek mythology. Yeah. I actually have the his axe from the recent Dad of War games hanging up on my wall over there.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
So,
I may be representing a golden god, but there's
the Golden Geeks, which were
yeah,
just
there we
announced
go.
this week. You typically, if you have a really good transition, you typically do jazz hands. So if you
okay.
could just,
I can do
yeah,
that.
there we go. Okay. That's the topic for this week. This week we are chatting about the Golden Geeks. The winners were just announced yesterday or 2 days ago. 2 days ago, and we, it's important to our hobby to discuss these. I think. I mean, it's a really interesting, just pulse of the nation almost of how are we feeling about these games that have come out this year. And I think that there are, in my mind, some interesting takes from the people.
So I think there are two. I mean, of course, there are many awards that matter for a lot of reasons, but the ones that I would have the most interest in talking about here are, I guess, really three. I think the Zenobia Awards is a very awesome project in general, and that's trying to recognize game designs in their nascent stages, underrepresented game designers, and a lot of people who are experienced veterans in the hobby are involved in kind of shepherding these along. So the Zenobia Awards are kind of its own thing. When we're talking about published games, the two award ceremonies outside of our own, which every channel and their brother and mother have their own awards ceremonies, but the two that matter the most to me are the Spiel des Jahres, which the reason why that's so important is because it is the Oscars of board games.
It is.
It's slanted for a lot of specific things, and there's a level of predictability that you could find in that. But there are a lot of people on this planet who will just buy the winners of those games. Like, whatever games get recognition for that is a huge prestigious thing that will be a footnote in gaming history for them. Then the Golden Geek Awards are so cool because Board Game Geek is the de facto hub of our hobby. All things board games currently and for the last 20 years have ebbed and flowed through Board Game Geek in a way that I don't really see that sort of centralization in many other hobbies. And because of that, the user base is... I think a very good representation of enthusiasts within our hobby.
Yeah.
And the Golden Geek Awards are a user-voted on
For the populace.
series of awards. Exactly.
Yeah, for the people.
So, for the people. So, how do we want to tackle this? What do you want to start on here,
So,
Eric?
they have it listed. I think that there's... we'll change up the order they have it listed, but I think go through the nominees for each category, talk about the winner, and then kind of discuss our opinions of what we would have voted for or what we did vote for. I don't know if you voted in it. I can't vote in it. I was not at the point where I had the reputation to vote for it, so I did not vote. But I have my thoughts.
Yep. Well, let's lead into it.
So, the first one for 2-player games, the nominees were Agent Avenue, Compile Main 1, Dune, War for Arrakis, Flatiron, A Jest of Robin Hood, Ironwood, Kelp, Shark vs. Octopus, King of Tokyo Duel, Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth, and Star Wars Unlimited. I was actually surprised by the winner of this, and I'm not necessarily surprised because I don't think it should have won. I just don't think it was if reading this, I didn't think it was going to win.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess this is kind of one of those like lowest common denominator type of things because the winner was the Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth. Why were you skeptical of it?
So, Lord of the Rings: Duel for Middle Earth, I think makes sense, especially with like how popular Lord of the Rings is. I just feel like in terms of the buzz I heard about the game's release, Kelp, Jest of Robin Hood, and Compile Main 1 were the ones that I immediately picked up as these are the games that I've heard the most buzz about from this list. So I would have bet dollars to donuts that one of those three would have won.
I agree with you, and I'm a huge fan of Kelp, and Jess of Robin Hood, and Ironwood. I think is one of the best games of last year, period. And I've played it a few more times. I played it last year, and it was still kind of just it wasn't quite making it for our end of the year list, but it's growing, and I think that one's going to continue to cement, but. The thing is that Kelp is, I think, an availability issue, and there's a level of specificity to that. Jest of Robin Hood is really good, but it has a look of being a GMT game, and it is a GMT game.
It is a GMT game.
That's not a bad thing, but there's a level of wargaminess to it that I think limits the broad audience, whereas Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth, I think a lot of people went into that expecting it to be just a reskin of Seven Wonders Duel, and it really more than anything feels like Seven Wonders Duel 2nd Edition that happened to have a Middle Earth theme.
Yeah.
And because of the beloved place that Seven Wonders Duel has in the hobby, I think Seven Wonders is a fine game. Seven Wonders Duel is one of the best games ever made.
Yeah.
And Duel for Middle Earth is even a little bit better than that. And so it's affordable. It has a really appealing theme. I don't know. I totally buy it. I see why it is why it's hanging at the top of this list.
Yeah, I think of the nominees, I probably would have chosen definitely not King of Tokyo Duel. I don't know. Jest of Robin Hood was fun. I would not be upset about that one winning, but Kelp would have really been the one that I thought would have won. But Lord of the Rings, Duel for Middle Earth, I haven't played. You have, so the Cardboard Herald is A-okay with that winning. The next category is artwork and presentation. This one feels the most loosey-goosey. I couldn't really feel, I mean, not necessarily. There are some other categories that I feel like are not particularly well defined what you're judging them based on.
Right.
I have not been able to figure out what the voting criteria was, and maybe that was in the actual voting block. But the next one is artwork presentation. Nominees are Arcs, Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game, Fromage, Harmonies, Kelp, Let's Go to Japan, Duel for Middle Earth, SETI, Unconscious Mind, Wondrous Creatures, and Wormspan, with the winner being Unconscious Mind. Sure.
No.
No?
It ain't it. To me. I mean, okay, so first off, I'm getting this out of the way. I shouldn't be picking on someone who's not the winner, but Fromage, I don't even know why it's in this category. I do not like the way that Fromage looks visually, aesthetically. I'm surprised that it's nominated in this category. Now, Unconscious Mind, I get it. There's a lot of art assets, and the artists are Andrew Bosley and Vincent Dutrait, who are two of the most well-known and celebrated artists in this industry. If you want a really damn good artist for your board game, those are two of the 10 names that are going to come up to the top, along with Ian O'Toole and Beth Sobel and Kwanchai Moria. Those are all names that you might turn to. Kyle Farron is another name with a lot of accolades in there, but
yeah.
of course Kyle is the house illustrator for Leader Games. But on Conscious Mind, like, I love Vincent Dutrait and Andrew Bosley's artwork. I just don't see the originality in this, and I would love to have highlighted something like, for example, Harmonies, which was a runner-up, which I think has a very arresting and catching visual style that doesn't look like other board games. And it was an opportunity to maybe recognize something that's more innovative as opposed to just best representation of things that we already see in the hobby.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I would also, like, if Harmonies won, I would also be, sure, yeah, totally. Because I think Harmonies is, like, super cohesive. Artwork fits the theme fits the artwork. Really good marriage there. I also, and this is a little bit more to do with just, I guess it depends on what you are meant to be judging it on. But Kelp Shark vs. Octopus is a gorgeous game, especially if you have, like, the miniatures that are on there. That's a gorgeous game, and I think the artwork and presentation, which in my mind, like, the presentation would include the, like, mahjong style tiles that you're playing as with the octopus. Like, that's a really satisfying thing to touch. Are you judging based on that, or is it just the artwork and graphic design? I guess I don't really know, but
yeah, production does go a long way for how a game actually feels apart from the mechanics of the game. And I could totally see what you're saying. Like, if this were the year that PAX Premier came out, would the fact that the totems are like clay pieces that have these really deep inlays on them, would that impact
is that
the artwork
to
presentation?
Impact? I don't, because my thing is, I don't even know if it's meant to impact, but if it is, sure. But yeah, I guess that's the part where I'm like,
a little squishy.
I
guess
a little squishy.
The fact that it's a user voted thing kind of leaves it in the hands of whoever feels that, the one versus the other. And I meant to bring this up. I did pull up the original 2006 Golden Geeks and the 2023s. I was giving GMT a little bit of a hard time for being a niche audience. The very first Golden Geek winner for two-player board game was Twilight Struggle, a GMT game, like the GMT game, which is funny. But at the same time, the last year's Golden Geek winner, or I guess the 2023 winner for a two-player game, was Sky Team. So I think that's the spectrum. When we started, this hobby was the people who were very into these heavy simulation war games that could be very dry and niche, whereas we're seeing Seven Wonders, Duel for Middle-earth, Sky Team, these more appealing, smaller, poppier, bite-sized games as the two-player winners now.
Yeah, well, and I think that also is just like I feel like we've mentioned this on the podcast before, but just two-player games are they are peaking right now in some ways. I mean, maybe they're not peaking, but like there's a ton of them coming out, and there's a ton of really good ones coming out. The next category we have is cooperative game. The nominees are Seventh Citadel, Hegemonia, which is maybe how that's pronounced. Thoughts on how that's pronounced?
I'm guessing Hegemonia. Yeah,
but it's an A. Hegemonia. Bomb Busters, Dead Cells, Fate Forge, Chronicles of Khan, Fellowship of the Ring Trick Taking, The Gang, Leviathan Wilds, Primal, The Awakening, Slay the Spire, Tidal Blades 2, and Wilmot's Warehouse. Now, I have not played most of these. These are a
Yeah.
lot of these are new to me. I've heard of most of them. There are a couple that I have not, such as Agimonia. I don't know if I've just been living under a rock, but I have not heard of that. Primal the Awakening I hadn't heard of, and I don't know if I should have.
It's funny because I consider cooperative games to be one of my favorite game types. And I even went out of my way to look for cooperative games last year to play some more. Not necessarily ones that came out that year, but I've been thinking a lot about like how much I love Spirit Island and wanting things in that vein. And there were so many on here that I hadn't played. This is the category that I have played the least of. The winner I've played, the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game, which I think is a very good game.
Yeah.
And
this is a thing. This is a thing that I need to clear up because I was going through it today, and when we were making our 2024 best of video, put this game as an honorable mention, and then took it out because it's a 2025 release. I thought.
Yeah, we received a copy of it as an early thing in 2024, but we removed it because the actual retail release was 2025.
And now I'm seeing it here, 2024. You look up the Board Game Geek 2024. What is this nonsense, Jack? What did you do?
It's so squishy, and it's so squishy when it comes to board games because, you know, like some things roll out in certain regions or, you know, have an early release at a convention, and like what do you actually call the release date? And then you compound that with like crowdfunding, and that becomes a whole nightmare. You know, like if this is the year in which they want to say that it's eligible for consideration, great. I do find it kind of crazy that a game that, even if it came out at the tail end of 2024, that this is one that had so much attention because it doesn't have that much opportunity to come to the forefront. Which makes me wonder if there's like a recency bias with this.
I was going to say, it doesn't matter, especially when the voting doesn't take place until April. And that's kind of similar to the Oscars, where it is like, you know, the Oscars, the voting happens in like February. So, you know, I think it is what it is, but that was just the thing that I need to clear up. I don't think that I am actually, in terms of cooperative game, I'm here for it because I think that game was one of my favorite cooperative games I played last year. But the big thing for me was just I had it written off as a 2025 release. So I'm kind of surprised that it was even in the running here. At the same time, it's a great cooperative game. I'm a little surprised, and this probably goes back to what you were mentioning earlier of just availability, but Slay the Spire, the board game, had such hype to it that I'm kind of surprised
it had a lot of hype. But it was also a later release that happened in the year. What I think is really telling about this category and the winner, because personally I would absolutely put Leviathan Wilds as the top of this, but Leviathan Wilds was a niche debut game by a small studio and came out towards the beginning of 2024. So I think that I guess it's kind of like the Oscars, you know, those January and February releases that completely get ignored during the next year's Oscar campaigning. But I think it just wasn't a year for really hot cooperative games that were particularly unifying. Sure, Lord of the Rings, the trick-taking game, is popular, but I don't think it is like making giant waves in the hobby in the way that the prior year Golden Geek winner being Sky Team once again really won the hearts and minds of everyone. And I started doing some research because cooperative games have been on my mind a lot recently, right? I got Fate of the Fellowship here, and an angle that I took with that review was almost like a retrospective, like a historic lens. And it made me think about the development of cooperative games, and it wasn't a like whole genre or, like type of gaming in the way that it is now. And it wasn't until 2016 that there was even a category in the Golden Geeks for a cooperative game. The first winner was 2016's best cooperative game, Mechs versus Minions, which is cool, and that did definitely make a big headway.
Yeah.
It was a League of Legends IP. Massive game, like absolutely massive. I have it on my shelf over there. It takes up so much space, but beautiful minis, cool system. But at the same time, I'm surprised that even though Pandemic came out like a decade earlier, that it took until 2016 to have a dedicated cooperative category.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think Fellowship of the Ring, to me, makes sense. Leviathan Wilds also, I think... I'm kind of surprised it isn't a runner-up. But, I think that's kind of what you get with a popular vote. That's how it is. Because this is also... I mean, it's not quite ranked choice voting. I have pulled up the voting method, but it is a style of ranked choice voting. Where it is...
Right.
Yeah. Until there is a plurality or a majority vote, you take all the votes, you take everybody who voted like this thing as their number 10 or as their number 1 and take it out and then go to the number 2. It's like the ranked choice voting in Alaska.
Whoa. Okay. All right. Whew. I was having like a panic attack. I still think this is a little bit weird, but I was looking again at the historic winners here. Mechs vs. Minions was the first one, and then we have Gloomhaven, The Mind, The Crew, Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, The Crew again, Mission Deep Sea. So I guess we got a lot of cooperative trick-taking going on here. Return to the Dark Tower, Sky Team, and then finally Fellowship of the Ring. What's missing from there is Pandemic Legacy, which... Pandemic Legacy did come out 2015, so that explains why it's not on here. They didn't have a dedicated genre for it, and also I find it kind of weird that
hold on.
Pandemic Legacy.
Who won in 2017?
Gloomhaven.
Oh,
yeah,
heard. I was
which makes sense.
I forgot that was 2017. I was about to be upset that Spirit Island didn't win.
Yeah,
Gloomhaven's fair.
Gloomhaven. Yeah, that
Gloomhaven. Okay,
that changed the game.
Okay, all right.
But still, surprised Pandemic Legacy Season 2 or Season 0 didn't get it kind of as like an honorary nod. But it is what it is. Yeah. What's our next category?
Next category, expansions. So we have Arcs, Blighted Reach, Expedition, Gears of Corruption, 2 different Forest Shuffle Alpine and Forest Shuffle Woodland Edge, Gaia Project, The Lost Feet, Heat, Heavy Rain, Obsession, Characters Expansion, Sky Team Turbulence, Terraforming Mars, Prelude 2, and the White Castle Matcha, which you have just released a review on. You should all go check that out, listeners and viewers of this podcast. If you haven't already, I assume you probably have if you're listening to this podcast. I feel like we're probably in a good spot there. With the winner being Arcs, the Blighted Reach expansion.
How are you feeling about that, Eric? How are you feeling about this?
Sure. Listen, we were talking about expansions recently, and I said that Arcs, the Blighted Reach expansion is one of my favorite expansions. I think it does so much to open up that world. At the same time, I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't played many of these expansions, so I'm not going to really comment on many of these things, but Sky Team Turbulence I have played.
Yeah,
I think
I've
that's
played
a
a good
lot
amount
of
of
fun.
these. I've played a good amount of these. Listen, I love arcs. I actually like arcs better without the Blighted Reach, but even still, I like arcs with the Blighted Reach, and I could totally see this, but there is something in my bones that feels weird about a simultaneously released
Yeah.
expansion taking the best expansion category. I don't know how else to do it. Like
I don't know either. I
you
don't really
can't
know.
entirely disqualify it either, but it feels so weird that like an add-on at the time that a game is released to be taking the best expansion. I don't know. Like, there's not a better way to do it. And in a lot of ways, arcs, it was originally developed with the content of the Blighted Reach in mind. So when someone is saying the most innovative game, are they talking about arcs with the Blighted Reach expansion, or are they talking about arcs on its own? I recognize that's a different category, but having it here is just, it's weird, it's squishy. I don't love it. I would much rather this go to another
It could go to the
expansion in this
runner-up.
category.
Heat Heavy Rain was the runner-up.
Yeah,
I kind of agree, especially with the fact that Arcs the Blighted Reach was like what Arcs originally was intended to be, and then they took it and separated it out.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that being a little bit flimsy of it being like this is a expansion when it was originally intended to be part of the base game that they then separated off. With that, though, it is a popularity contest, and it makes total sense to me that Arcs is going to win that. I'm actually kind of surprised that some of the categories that Arcs didn't win that it was up for, not because I think that it should have, but just because I think that it is interesting with it being such a I will say the most popular game of last year. Like, there are definitely other games in contention, but just in terms of popularity, Arcs had the most hype around it. Arcs was definitely like one of the most talked about games. And that leads me to our next category. After you go ahead and say yours, but I have some thoughts about Arcs in the next category.
Yeah, so innovative. The winner for innovative was Arcs, with runners up Fromage and SETI. And I disagree. As far as being an innovative game, if we are talking about Arcs with Blighted Reach, I'm here for it. If we're talking about Arcs on its own, I don't know that I would necessarily call that a super innovative game. Like, what do you think?
I disagree. I disagree with Arcs winning the category. I think that Arcs. So if we're gonna say Arcs, the Blighted Reach expansion is an expansion, like we're saying that Arcs, the base game, is. You're not considering that when you're considering it, just saying Arcs in terms of the game. Now, in theory, if you had changed it to be like Arcs, the Blighted Reach expansion in terms of innovative, I could see that argument much more. But like, City of Six Moons is a game that's in a completely alien language that you have to decipher while playing the game to figure out the rules of the game that you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and I haven't even played City of Six Moons. I don't even know if I would have voted for it in this category. But like, Arcs, I think is an amazing game. I had it as my favorite game of last year. Like, I clearly enjoy Arcs. I don't know that I would like, if we're voting on just the term innovative, I don't know that Arcs gets my vote in this category. Again, it goes back to it's a popularity contest.
I mean, it does have some novel things. It's got the trick-taking action system, the declarative point system that happens. Like that. That's really cool. It does some new things, but I think even Kelp would be a good example of something that I don't think I've ever played a hidden movement game that looks or feels like Kelp and blends disparate systems in the way that it does. So, like, I think we as a community should be thinking about not just what our favorite game is that's possible to vote in each category, but think about like what it is that we're recognizing within the concept of each category, because this is, one of those things where your vote is manifesting things in the industry by recognizing certain things as worthwhile endeavors for being innovative. Then that's going to shape the minds of publishers who don't want to take too many risks in putting something out there. Now, again, ARCs, we love ARCs.
We love ARCs. We had nothing against ARCs.
There's an opportunity for many games to shine in different ways.
Yeah.
Let's carry on.
So I'm gonna skip.
We got a lot of categories to go.
I'm gonna skip the next few categories. I'm gonna swap to just saying the runners up and the winner for each category. For party game, which is what I'm gonna jump to next. The runners up were Things and Rings, The Gang, and Flip 7. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I don't see The Gang as a party game, but sure, it's still a solid game from what we played at PAX. I think it's a totally reasonable game. I haven't played Flip 7, so I'm not going to disparage it. I will say Things and Rings is so much fun.
Yes.
I feel like it's difficult for me to, like, I don't think I would have voted for any of these other games, even having played them. But again, this goes back to, I haven't played Flip 7, so I don't know. Flip 7 might be very fun.
I think Things and Rings, to me, is the best in this category. I have played Flip 7. I've played all of these games at this point. I agree with you. I don't think The Gang is really a party game.
I'm very confused about it being in this category.
Things and Rings would have been a great contender for the best innovative game. And it's, man, like, it's such a cool concept. It does what you want out of a party game in getting people talking. Like, the rule system is squishy or subjective in just the right way, where you get people talking about, like, what is allowable or not allowable, or how did you think about this? Like, in the way that Bananagrams, or not Bananagrams, Apples to Apples, the other fruit-based game, like, brings a level of personal subjectivity and interpretation, but then causes you to discuss why you did or did not think something applied there. It has a degree of that, but using Venn diagrams is such a smart system. It is inviting, it's quirky, it's weird, and that art aesthetic, as a direct nod to Dr. Seuss's illustrations, like, man, talk about something that is inviting people to the table. The total miss in not having this as the winner of the category.
I'm going to go on a very small tangent just because I feel like it is related. Bananagrams, a friend of mine plays it with her wife and she's not the best speller, and she openly admits that. So whenever they play Bananagrams, they do thematic Bananagrams, and what that means is when they play, they care less about spelling, but all of your words have to be based on a specific category, which the best one so far has been Gen Z baby names, where you have to you take your letters, you play Bananagrams as normal, but you don't have to care about spelling. You just have to put out words that you can argue fits the theme. And everybody at the end of the round goes around explaining how their words possibly fit the theme. That's very fun. Would recommend people try that out. The next category is print and play. I'll say I've only played one of these games. Despite print and play being like something that I feel like I did a ton when I started out the hobby, I missed this year, and I'll wear that on my sleeve. I should have
Listen,
played more.
audience, are we outing ourselves right here? Like, are you listening to this and going like, are these guys really board game reviewers? Like, we try to play so many new games. We're publishing
games.
often multiple reviews every week, like at least one new review every week, sometimes multiple. And yet there are so many games that don't come to the forefront. But yeah, I wonder, like, it would be interesting to see how many, like, what percentage of each category the average voter has logged a play in. Like, I think that would be really cool data. Of the people who log plays with regularity, what percentage of those people who have logged plays have played, 50% of the games in each category?
Well, and that's something that Board Game Arena did for theirs. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up their rules. But they did, because it's all within their own, within their system, they were able to be like, unless you have played a game, you cannot vote on a game. You cannot vote in this category unless you have logged a play in every game that is currently up for voting. And
speaking of, did you see the recent news that the Motion Picture Academy was going to begin requiring that voting members have seen all movies?
I did see that.
And like the major shock that everyone has is like, wait a second, the people who are voting on these haven't seen all movies?
You didn't.
It is a lower barrier to entry to watch a movie. Like, playing a game.
You get sent them all the time. I know a ton of people who used to be in the academy in some way, and they got sent so many movies all the time, nonstop.
Yeah, and
for your
I get it.
DVDs.
You have obligations and other things to do. Same thing here. We haven't played all these games, but I would argue watching a 2-hour movie is so much less of an investment than playing a game, often multiple times, to form an opinion, because the first time that you're playing, you're just learning that game, and you have to also arrange for someone else to be there to learn the game with you. And you have to go through the process of like reading the rule book, learning to play a game, and like getting it played is so much more of an investment than like watching a movie or watching a show or anything.
And I think that goes back to games are much more of a time commitment than a lot of other media, where it's like, just to get an opinion on a game, you have to read the rulebook and learn how to play it, and then play it a couple times. With the print and plays, the runners-up were Forage, a 9-card solitaire, Rome, Fate of an Empire, and the winner being 52 Realms Adventures. I'm going to go ahead and say I don't know enough to have a strong opinion on this category. This is one that they're just... I had played Grimworld. That was the one I had played. I had fun with it. I don't know that I would say it's necessarily the best print and play game of the year. With that said, I haven't played other print and play games this year. Like, I have, but not of the ones nominated. I've played other print and play games, but not ones that were up for consideration.
And I pretty much don't play any print and play games. I play print and play games that my buddy Mike Hyman designs. Like, those are the only print and play games that I play. So not a good category. Not a good category personally.
Next one, solo games, is my category. I say not having played the winner. The runners-up are...
But you really want to play the winner.
I really want to play the winner. It is so tough to get a hold of this game. The runners-up are Imperium Horizons. Good job. Gloomhaven, Buttons and Bugs, which Jack has a review on. And the winner is Slay the Spire, the board game. I have not been able to feasibly get a copy of Slay the Spire, the board game. It's just... I got a budget for board games, and I cannot spend $100 on Slay the Spire, the board game.
Yeah.
Sure. This one again makes sense to me because it had so much hype. And the other solo games I just don't think came into this with enough hype other than maybe Civolution. Imperium Horizons definitely had hype, but not to the level Slay the Spire did. I would be surprised. I would have been surprised if any other game won other than Slay the Spire, not because it should have or shouldn't have won, but more so it just is. It is such a widely known and revered game so far.
I am surprised that Buttons and Bugs didn't take it here because of the beloved nature of Gloomhaven. And I honestly think that the reason is that there is a smaller percentage of people who will buy a 100% dedicated solo game like Buttons and Bugs.
Yeah.
As opposed to people who would get Slay the Spire because they really love Slay the Spire, they want to play Slay the Spire, and they happen to play the solo version of it as well, which I bet is the reason why Slay the Spire is at the top of this. Looking at the previous winners of this category, the majority of the winners have been multiplayer games that have a solo component as opposed to fully dedicated solo games. That said, there recently has been more of those. Under Falling Skies won in 2020, Final Girl 2021, Legacy of You was 2023. So like those are all dedicated solo games, but outside of that, which surprisingly there was a solo category before there was a cooperative category. Since 2014 is when solo games have been voted on. Like Scythe is one of the winners here. Honestly, I never really liked Scythe as a solo game.
It's not a good solo game. I have a question, and this goes back to a different year. Did Gloomhaven win Best Print and Play in 2021? If you have that in front of you. I don't have all of the years in front of me. I just have like the current year, and it sounds like you might have them.
Yeah. So if you just Google Golden Geek Awards, this is good for audience to know because it's important to know about our history. You'll come to a page that has both the award sets, which you can look at the years, but then there's also a categories feature, which is really nice. So I'm just clicking on the print and play here.
Gloomhaven did win that year.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Okay.
Interesting, My Little Scythe won as the best print and play before it became a official title that Stonemaier released.
Yeah. Okay, so solo games, Slay the Spire won. Sure. Makes sense. To me, it makes sense. To you, it sounds like you were expecting Gloomhaven to win, but I kind of agree with the thought that a non-solo only game might have a better chance to win this just because more people will own it and therefore have played it.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think people who love solo games, if people who viewed themselves as a solo gamer exclusively voted for this, I think Imperium Horizons would win.
Probably.
Solo players love that freaking game.
It's so good.
I bet you there's a lot of people who are voting for Golden Geeks who don't really care about solo games who voted for Slay the Spire.
Well,
that's why I'm going out on a limb here. It may be absolutely excellent, but
that might also be the case. What I will point out is through the voting system, if you vote on any game and then just choose NA as in you didn't play it for the other games, it ranks those games as your lowest ranked game. So if you have if you only have played 7 of the games, the other 3 games will all be your 8th ranked game.
Right.
So I can definitely see it being like, oh, I've played Slay the Spire. It was I'll put it at like number 4, but I haven't played the rest of these, so I'm going to put NA as all of those. That makes Slay the Spire your number 1.
Right.
Is what it is. I think solo game is so, like, what a person's favorite solo game is tends to be more subjective than I think a lot of other categories, just because it really is one person's sole opinion.
Yeah.
So, is what it is. Thematic game is the next category. This is another one that the definition for it is squishy. The runners up are the Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth, Let's Go to Japan, with the winner being SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Jack?
Boo! I disagree with this. I mean, I
disagree
like
with this
SETI.
as well.
I like SETI. I had a conflicting opinion on SETI. As I've played more SETI, I've enjoyed SETI more. But nonetheless, I think there are many more thematic games that could be recognized in this category where the theme is better integrated into the game system itself. SETI has a lot of theme, but I do not think that there are a ton of decisions that you're making that correlate to that theme in the same way that, again, Kelp, I think, would be a great example of utilization of theme. Pagan would have been a great example of utilization of theme. What's that?
Yeah, it's a 2022 release.
Pagan is?
Pagan. Yeah, I looked it up too because I was going to bring it up in two-player game, but then I saw that. It is a 2022 release. Pagan, Fate of Roanoke.
That is crazy.
It is very surprising.
Kickstarted. Or maybe it was a European release and it was just getting an American release when we were recently doing it. Yeah.
But yes, I think I agree with your disagreement. SETI to me, and this is nothing to do with the game itself. I just feel like the theme didn't really fit the gameplay in a way that I felt was like, oh, this theme works great with this game. In a similar way that I think I am glad that Arcs didn't win this category because I really love Arcs. I think the theme is really great and I think the gameplay is really great. I don't know that I necessarily think of those things as being like Arcs is a really great thematic game in the way that I would agree that Kelp feels really thematic in terms of like the octopus is like pushing and pulling like an octopus while the shark is like hunting for prey.
Honestly, I think a Jest of Robin Hood would be really great here as well. I think that even though Jest feels more abstract, it still, I think, has this essence where, you know, like if you're the Merry Men player, you're feeling, you know, cheeky and, you know, subversive and playing as the sheriff, you have to rule with an iron fist and entrap Robin Hood. Like it's tapping into the theme in ways where you can correlate what you're doing to what it's supposed to represent in a way that I don't think SETI does. Or even for that matter, the runners up in this, you know, like I think this is a missed opportunity or a misunderstanding of what we're trying to recognize.
Another one that I would just put up for it, and I know that it's a much smaller release. I wouldn't expect it to be on this list. I'm not like really, I do not consider myself surprised, but We're Sinking to me was like one of the most thematic games I played last year, just in terms of like I was really like I am a pirate trying to kill a monster and also like be mean to the crew that I'm working with and like try to get as much like I felt like there was such a beautiful, that to me was like one of the best marrying themes to mechanics in a game that I played. That would probably be my winner, but SETI ain't it. SETI ain't it in this category. The next category is War Game. We have two runners up, which is Dune, War for Arrakis, and A Jest of Robin Hood, with the winner being Arcs.
Agreed.
I guess I disagree.
It depends on what you're looking for in War Game, but yeah.
I disagree only for the sake of I don't mentally consider Arcs a war game. Like it is. I get that because it's a conflict. It's a conflict and collapse in the reach. It is conflict.
Yeah.
It is a conflict game.
I could see it in the same way that there's a lot of deliberation on something like Blood Rage. You know, Blood Rage has a conflict-heavy theme. It is a conflict-heavy game, but you know, like you're trying to obtain points, and conflict is only one of the mechanisms to do that.
Yeah, like in a way, like I would totally Root is a war game. Totally consider Root being a war game. Arcs. There just are so many other ways to succeed in that game. Like, you can, in theory, it's probably not the most optimal way of playing. In theory, you can win never having entered a battle willingly.
Especially if we're talking about with the Blighted Reach expansion, yes. I think if you are playing Arcs
base
well,
game,
base
it does
game,
require you to...
either you are going to enter a battle because you chose to or because someone else did. You know, like if other players are doing what they are needing to do to remain competitive, they're putting pressure on you.
Yeah.
So like if you're just kind of hovering outside a battle, it is up to the other players at that table to gang up on you, to make sure that you don't become too entrenched and too expansive. And I think that's something that the game recognizes as part of its design. But when we're talking about the Blighted Reach, I think there are too many competing priorities to really say that it is going to be a war game, because there are a lot of, you know, like what you're doing might have nothing to do with battle, and what I'm doing might have nothing to do with battle, so we don't really have an incentive to combat one another, except for when it's either interacting with NPCs or we're competing over, say, the same resource, or you know, certain things on the table.
One game that didn't get a runner-up or the winner that I do just want to point out, because we mentioned it earlier in this podcast, Red Dust Rebellion, which has come out. We just mentioned it earlier, and we were talking about we weren't sure if it came out or not. It did come out. In fact, it was nominated, so it came out last year at some point. I am kind of surprised in this category that Arcs winning, again, if we're thinking of it as a popularity contest, Arcs winning makes sense. Like, even like completely ignoring the hesitation I would have to vote for it as a war game, like, even if we're taking it as it is a war game, Arcs makes sense as winning. Its popularity contest, Arcs is one of the most popular games, and especially from this list, the most popular game that was on this list. I'm, based on that reasoning, kind of surprised that Undaunted 2200 Callisto, which was a nominee, wasn't a runner-up. But a Jest of Robin Hood makes sense to me. Like, that is a two-player war game. In so much as the conflict that you have in that game is a very central focus of it. I'm kind of surprised that... oh, now I forget what I was going to say. I was in the middle of saying it. I have to go back up to where I was thinking. Ironwood. I'm surprised Ironwood wasn't nominated here.
Actually, that's the one that I was thinking of as would be a very good contender in here. So Undaunted, I think Undaunted always deserves more recognition because it's amazing. And Ironwood is interesting because that's another one of those games where what you're doing isn't necessarily combat related. Combat informs the game, but one player is kind of doing like a capture the flag type thing, and the other player is doing kind of like a base building thing, and the twain does not need to meet unless you are playing well and you're trying to interfere with your opponent, or your opponent just happens to be where you need to capture your flag from, or you are trying to capture a flag and someone else is already in the middle of building a fortification there. Ironwood has a level of specificity, I think, that will put it at a disadvantage here in that it's a high-price two-player game. The components are really amazing, and the illustrations are incredible and probably could have been in that illustrations category. Yeah. And presentation, like, holy cow, the metal pieces in that really should have been one of the top runners. But at the same time, it kind of has this conflict-heavy war game feel. It's more expensive than a typical two-player game, as we think of them as more diminutive games for the most part now. And yeah, so I don't know. I think it should have been in here, but it wasn't.
Congratulations, Arcs. Great job being a war game.
Congratulations, Arcs.
The next category is Best Podcast, which we got to get ourselves on this one of these years. Jack, you and I. I can't nominate because I don't have enough things. I don't have enough Geek Gold, but the winner...
So,
go ahead.
Let me... This one, I think this is a great one to end on. Because this is, we're pretty much at the end of this list. There's a best board game app.
Yeah, that is what it is.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that's really that important for this discussion. But ending here, there are so many amazing voices in the board game hobby. And of course, we love that our audience supports us. But I am just... I totally recognize these other podcasts that are here, and I like all the people involved in them. So the runners-up, Space Biff, if you don't listen to this podcast, or even more so, if you don't read Space Biff's reviews, those are the types of written reviews that I wished I could write when I got into covering board games. Incredibly inspirational as a writer, as a critic, as a thoughtful person thinking about a hobby and a medium and having a degree of self-awareness and levity, but at the same time balancing that with gravitas and depth and critical analysis. I think Space Biff is the best writer in the board game space, period. Board game hot takes. Tim has been on our podcast. I've loved to see that Board Game Hot Takes has grown and is such a great format for a podcast. It's something that I wish I had thought about. We actually have a category on this channel called TCbH Hot Takes that predates Board Game Hot Takes, but it was nowhere near as smart as what they do of some friends getting together, playing one session of a game, and then talking about it. Just talking about what their opinion is and pulling it apart. That's so smart. And I've only interacted with Tim, who kind of handles most of the social media of their stuff, does the most outreach, goes on other podcasts, that kind of stuff. I'm just a huge fan of what they do. And then Beyond Solitaire,
the winner.
Yes, Beyond Solitaire is the winner, and Liz is just one of the best people in the hobby. And I've met with her in person a few times. Her involvement in the Zenobia Awards is really great, and she, along with a few other people, including Cole Worley, came onto the Cardboard Herald podcast to talk about that when Zenobia was in its inception. And she's now the solo arm of Leader Games, which is so cool and such wonderful recognition. Just an amazing podcast, an amazing presence, and someone who has put in the time in this hobby, really giving thorough, thoughtful analysis and perspective for years. So totally deserved.
Yeah, totally. I very happy with both the winner and the runners up here in terms of like where for the hobby, these are just super influential podcasts, and I think that they are great to represent the hobby. We do have 3 more categories. I skipped them over.
3 more.
We got light game of the year, medium game of the year, and heavy game of the year. We've talked about all of these games frequently, so I'm not going to like really go too deep into it. The winner of light game of the year, voted on by the Golden Geek Awards, is Castle Combo. The winner of medium game of the year is Harmonies, and the winner of heavy game of the year is SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I'm gonna go ahead and put my flag in the ground here, saying Harmonies probably should have been a light game of the year. Like it's weird. They've bracketed it off in weird ways where it feels like Harmonies and Wormspan being in the same category feels like it shouldn't be the case. Like Harmonies just is so much lighter rules explanation than some of these other games. Harmonies being in the same category, Slay the Spire, doesn't feel right. And it still won. But I'm surprised, especially considering some of the things that are in light game of the year, that Harmonies was bumped up to this range. Good for Castle Combo. I guess I'm back to being confused. The voters of this situation, where it's like they've had other games in light game of the year, like Flip 7 won one best party game. Flip 7 is like one of the only games nominated for other things. Same with like The Gang was also nominated for a few other things, but then it didn't win. So I'm a little bit confused with the voters.
I think really they're going for like time frame on the light versus medium, less complexity and more to do with the amount of time that it takes. What really jumps out to me, one, heavy game of the year. I am so surprised that Arcs did not win this.
Surprised Arcs didn't win this.
SETI is very well liked. I wonder if, with SETI being a CGE game, Czech Games release, I wonder if there's a more diehard European fan base for that isn't necessarily as strong in Arcs. But from what I can see in the English-speaking discourse, Arcs seem to be the darling for everyone. And SETI definitely was beloved, but I just do not see the kind of fervor in online discourse for it. So this was really shocking to me. What was also very shocking is one of our favorite games, Harvest,
nowhere on
is
this
not
list.
On any of these.
Nowhere.
And
on
I
this
wonder
list.
if it wasn't available for consideration because it is a remake of a pre-existing game. But if that's the case, I would argue that Harvest has as many thematic and mechanical changes to it as the Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth does.
Ship of Theseus, Jack. Ship of Theseus.
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. So, like any time that there's award ceremonies, you could pick apart the semantics. And I do have to have a degree of sympathy for the people who are always putting these things together because you have to draw the line somewhere. And sometimes that doesn't mesh with other decisions, but if you fiddle with it in one place, then you start over analyzing everything else, and there's no way that you're going to be able to perfectly satisfy all of those disparate elements. So I imagine even the people who were putting this together were like, man, I don't know, this is kind of bunk, but we got to make a decision somewhere, so let's settle with this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that it is community voted kind of lets them go, hands are clean.
Let them
I didn't
decide.
make this decision. They did. The nominee situation, I'm not perfectly clear on, where it's like how do things get nominated necessarily, but I think that it because I also know that the community put up things for nomination, so I wonder if it is just like they've put things up for nomination. Maybe Harvest just wasn't on the list for people. I don't really know. But that is the Golden Geek Awards. If you're wondering who won Best Board Game App, it was Dune Imperium. I liked that app. Sure. Go right ahead. Direwolf Digital had like a couple games in that nomination. Sure. Great. That sounds good.
If nothing else, this brought to my attention that Codenames had a 2024 app and made me go like, whoa.
Yeah, that was big.
Codenames.
It was big at PAX. There was a real heavy push by CGE. Yeah, when we went to our CGE event, they had two separate booths to enter the CGE room.
That's how on the periphery board game apps are for me. I really need to get with the times.
You do.
Cool. Well, were there any other notable snubs here for you, or particular games that you really wanted to see, or categories? In the way that we discussed, solo games were a new addition to the Golden Geeks throughout its lineage. Cooperative games became a new category. The next year is going to be the 20th annual Golden Geeks. Is there a category that you would like to see next year?
I have two categories that I would like to pitch. One would be small publisher. I think could be a really fun way to just... There are so many smaller publishers that could really benefit from being nominated and just having more people see them. And I also think that just is super healthy for the hobby to have that be something that gets recognized of, here's the best game from a small publisher. And then the other one would be like best underrepresented community. We kind of already have the Zenobia Awards, so I don't know if we need this, but this game would be more about the finished product. And it feels kind of tough, well, especially because next year I feel like there's just going to be... It will be tough for any game to, I feel like, beat Molly House in that category if it comes out.
Right.
Just because of where Molly House stands. This is saying less about any games that have come out this year that fit that category, but more so just the hype that Molly House has is definitely going to carry it into the win if that were a category. But the small publisher would be the one that I would more want to see.
I think I would like to see maybe as a better way to handle small publisher, which I think these could coexist, but debut. Either debut by a designer or a debut by a publisher. Maybe those could both exist. Maybe they could be one category, either debut by a designer or a publisher, or maybe these exist in parallel to small publisher, because small publisher feels like there are so many small publishers in this hobby. What does constitute a small publisher? Is Stonemaier Games a small publisher? They don't have a very big team, but at the same time, they're like the biggest, most mainstream within the hobby gaming side of this hobby. They're not Milton Bradley, they're not Asmodee, but as far as a hobby gamer,
everybody knows
what Scythe
is. Wingspan. It's Wingspan, baby. You know what Wingspan is. One other one that this is less like a new category, but just I would love a definition of what is light game of the year, what is medium game of the year.
Yeah.
Well, and I saw some comments talking about how it's broken down by the Board Game Geek weight ranking, but oh no, maybe switch it to like playtime. Like playtime could be an interesting one instead of going light game of the year, medium heavy. Playtime feels like that would be a natural. These are the games that are competing with one another, or these are the games that are meant to be competing with one another. But those are my thoughts. Do you have any closing thoughts on the Golden Geeks?
Just once again, like it's great that we have a community that's so participatory, and we have, like a cool centralized place. This matters, like this matters a lot for publishers. It matters a lot for designers, artists, and all the people who work in this industry. And you as the gamer, like these are the games that surface to the top. Even if you never go to the Golden Geek page, the amount of traffic that it brings to these games ends up making this recursive interest, this compounding effect where it brings traffic, which then brings it to the top of the hotness, which if it's at the top of the hotness is going to get more people who are just clicking on it because they're like, wait, why is Flip 7, number 1, 2, 3, 4 down on the hotness? And then they click on that, which then confirms its position at the hotness, and then they're looking at the Golden Geek Awards. Like these things really impact how people view these games. So it's great that people participate in it, and it's great that it exists. So those are my closing thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you have any thoughts you want to share, feel free to comment on this episode on YouTube or Spotify, or email them in to cardboardherald@gmail.com. We are so happy that you have taken this time to listen to us chat about the big awards of the year. And
give us your spicy takes.
Yeah,
we want to hear your spicy takes on these.
Spiciest takes possible down in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. I have been Eric, along with Jack, for the Cardboard Herald podcast.
Bye.